Would you consider yourself to be a tactical or a strategic programmer? Do you just want to get the job done, or are you a bit of a perfectionist? What both of these terms precisely mean, which way of working is preferred and why, what psychology has to do with today's video, and most importantly, how you can make yourself a lot more valuable for your company and the job market in general, you will find out right now. In general, there are two major ways to approach a programming problem, tactically or strategically. I'll explain what those terms mean via an example. Let me make this programming problem a bit more concrete. Let's say it's a ticket to implement a taxation calculation for your company's webshop that your colleague has been assigned to within your team. It won't fall apart due to bad requirements this time around. They are pretty straightforward, as the webshop is only available in your company's home country for now. Let's jump into the mindset of a tactical programmer to solve the problem at hand. A tactical programmer's number one priority is to deliver a solution to the posed problem, so an implementation of the tax calculator in this case, as quickly as possible. They know how strict the deadlines are and made a good reputation for themselves with the product owner and the higher-ups in the past by being known as the ticket ninja. Shortly after having picked it up, the PR is opened and you as their coworker wonder what you're doing wrong. Of course, there's a catch. Being a tactical programmer also entails not shying away from taking a shortcut in the interest of time. Coming back to our example, a tactical programmer would have had the requirements in front of them and get going right away. 7% on tax on food items, 9% on non-food necessities, 19% on everything else. 7% piece of cake, they think to themselves, and the business logic is implemented in the blink of an eye. Apart from finishing quicker, taking shortcuts mainly accomplishes one thing in the long run: complexity. All this taxation logic was just implemented. If this, then that. Future-proofing was not part of the job, and thus maintainability suffers. Doing this once is not even that horrible. The problem is that the typical tactical programmer approaches every single ticket like this and builds up a cart house of a web shadow over time by doing so. Let's jump half a year into the future. Many more features have been implemented and the company is doing well. So well in fact that the expansion to another country is announced. This time around you are assigned the task to update the tax calculator for said different country with different taxation laws. Only to find out that the original tax calculator is a whole mess by now that would take you forever to refactor to be able to properly add the new business requirements. You are at a crossroads decision right now. Be a tactical programmer, take another shortcut and just get it done, earn the transient praise from the manager for swiftly adding the new taxation rules, or be diligent, taking the extra time for the refactor and coming out of this ticket not only with the required business logic, but also an improved tax calculator implementation. Most software engineers, specifically junior ones, would gladly take the praise of the manager. After all, they are new to the job, want to make a name for themselves and don't lollygag around on the company's bill, right? However, once said bill is accounted for, it feels more like shopping for a new tech gadget. Buy cheap, buy twice. Let's move to the solution of this problem and see how a strategic programmer would have approached it. It is likely already quite clear by now what a strategic programmer's mindset looks like. A good design is the top priority. A program just passing the requirements is simply not enough. They are called requirements after all, implying that this is what you need to get a passing grade. Coming back to our example, a strategic programmer would have directly started to think about the future of a tax calculator. And that laws are changing or the different jurisdictions need to be supported is probably one of the first thoughts that comes to mind in this case. So the strategic programmer implemented something like a strategy pattern, for instance. In that way, maintaining the tax calculator in the future is the number one priority, not if they can set a new record for fastest ticket completion within the team. As with everything, there has to be some moderation. You similarly should not aim for a design award, only to also be the slowest programmer under the sun. Allocate a chunk of the ticket's development time to producing a good design while focusing on the implementation itself for the majority of it. All that should be avoided is having speed as the top priority in your back of your head, and instead a good system design that is future-proof and easy to change going forward. I guess we can agree that on paper, being a strategic programmer sounds better, but is it really? Yes, it is. But more importantly than the intrinsic motivation of building something solid, there's another one as well. The complexity starts piling up, and refactoring to decrease it becomes more and more time consuming, until a tipping point is reached where even the most strategic programmers of the team give in and move to the dark side, as they realize that the codebase is doomed since refactoring it would take an eternity. Think back to the crossroads decision. Once a codebase goes deeper and deeper down the tactical programming path, it becomes increasingly difficult to still turn around. The complexity of the system is constantly increasing, while decreasing it will take a non-linear amount of time comparatively. The point is that everything can be refactored, but the oh so valuable time to do so has to be taken into account as well. This leaves you, your team, and the entire company with the following outcome. It would have been more time-saving in hindsight to foster a strategic programming approach from the get-go. Sure, the initial time investment is higher, but once the later refactorings are added to the bill, every manager has to realize that more time was spent in the end by going with a tactical approach, even if it was involuntarily. In other words, the initial cost of the strategic approach amortizes itself quickly in the long run. And let's be real, in many such code bases the eternity to refactor is merely a rhetoric, as it cannot even be estimated in hours anymore at some point how long it would take to clean up the residue of months and months of prolonged tactical programming. You just start living with the fact that you are working on a landfill of an application. The issue, as I touched upon earlier, is that being a tactical programmer oftentimes makes you popular with your non-programmer colleagues, while the opposite is the case toward your more senior programmer coworkers. The underlying reason for this issue is mainly a psychological one. It is a good example of operant conditioning, first introduced by American psychologist B.F. Skinner in his 1938 book The Behavior of Organisms. To be more precise, it is an example of positive reinforcement conditioning. There's a behavior, being fast at work, that many managers react to with praise, the reward. Specifically as a junior, the fear of being fired is very common, since many also suffer from imposter syndrome. If you don't know what that is, a video will follow soon. Make sure to subscribe to the channel to not miss out on that one. Thus, many people give themselves up to appealing to these authoritative figures. In this way, at the same time, it is also a negative reinforcement, since it seems like one can avoid the negative stimulus of being confronted why this ticket took so long, which again heightens the fear of being fired. That in itself is just human. Pretty much every action that you do is connected to achieving a positive stimulus or avoiding a negative one. On the other side of the coin, the strategic programmers are at least partially adhering to the concept of delayed gratification, a term that was not coined but first described by Austrian neurologist Sigmund Freud, which is defined as the resistance to the temptation of an immediate pleasure in the hope of obtaining a valuable and long-lasting reward in the long term. Think of it as the polar opposite of how r/Wall Street Bets operates. People do this all the time as well. For instance, when actually studying for an exam instead of watching another episode on Netflix with the long-term reward of a good education in mind. Similarly, designing good software is not a short-term reward at all. It only comes in handy, rewarding and potentially praise-bringing in the long run. In our fast-moving world, I guess you can see why tactical programmers are often the manager's favorites. Time to market is oftentimes the top priority for many projects, specifically if they are backed by a startup. And let me be clear, being a fast programmer is not equal to being a tactical one. One can be fast and diligent at the same time. Most often, however, it is one or the other. But don't forget another thing, git blame. I can tell you that I had many moments where in a legacy codebase I saw a subpar piece of code and could already predict the candidate to blame. Something that will also get through to your managers eventually. Needless to say if they are programmers themselves, of course. Think back to studying for the exam versus watching Netflix. After a long time of tactical programming or just watching Netflix, the short-term rewards in this case, you are stuck with a hideous codebase or no good education in the other example, both of which are not helping you right now and will neither bring any more rewards in the future. An important thing to keep in mind, however, with all of this is that the majority of tactical programmers are not malevolent. They are most often subconsciously ridden by the reward system. It takes a conscious examination of this to realize which way of working is preferred and why. And by the way, this goes for both engineers as well as managers, many of whom probably don't realize either which programmers' behaviors they are rewarding with their own. This of course is the reason why I produced this video. I want to be honest with you, when I started out I used to work in a very tactical fashion. So, to summarize, as a manager, consider supporting a strategic approach to programming, even if you're not a programmer yourself. Maybe others can help you assess how your programmers are doing in this regard. It will usually pay off in the long run. As a software engineer, you'll be valued highly if you're able to consistently find this healthy balance between diligence and speed. In this order. Just always keep in mind, code just passing the requirements is not enough for a strategic programmer, and short-term rewards are not what one is after. The long-term rewards of adopting a strategic mode of working will be both superior and longer lasting. One note at the end. I solely approach this topic from a software engineering standpoint, of course, as the name of the channel implies. I am aware that economic forces can literally force a startup into a more tactical approach at times. But nevertheless, you as the software engineer watching this should try to push for better software. Others are loud and will push back, needless to say. Do you have any experience with tactical programmers causing havoc in a project? Let me know in the comments. Apart from that, consider subscribing to the channel for more videos on improving your software engineering skill set. Make sure to give this video a like if you enjoyed it, and leave me a comment if you have any questions or remarks. Tschüss!